One of my biggest questions after the beta has ended is which maps are we going to be playing competitively and how are those maps going to work out? So if we think back to last year and we're thinking about some of those main maps in Modern Warfare, such as a Hackney Yard, played really good for Hardpoint. It's not one of those classic maps like Raid or Slums or Standoff from Black Ops 2 that I'm going to be wishing that we had year after year moving forward, but it was a pretty good map. Same with Gunrunner. Gunrunner was a pretty good map for competitive. Ramaza, pretty good map. Petrograd was so-so. In my regards, in terms of the Hardpoint maps, it was probably the worst one, but overall, we had pretty decent maps. At the end of the beta, I went through, and just like a week or so ago, I'll go ahead, I'll put a description down below. We talked through Moscow, and I think Moscow was going to be one of those classic Hardpoint maps. I really like the rotations. I like how the map works. I just think that they did a really nice job for that. But with the other maps, obviously, you can't really use Cartel, right? You can't have half the map with 6-foot tall weeds where you can't see anything. That cannot be a competitive map. When you look at another map like Miami, the middle of it is just so wide open. While I will say Miami actually played really well when it came to control, I didn't really like it for Hardpoint. It's not the worst, but just that no man's land that's right in the middle of the map, right where BDOM is. There's just so many places you can get shot from. It's not really all that competitive. But after the first time that I played Satellite, I kind of thought maybe this one could, but with the dunes over on the right, it didn't make too much sense how that could be a competitive map. But after actually playing it this past weekend, when it came to Hardpoint, again, once it came to the second weekend of the beta, that's when they released Hardpoint as a game mode that you can play in the beta. When it came to playing Hardpoint on Satellite, after I played it 3 or 4 times, I got pretty used to it. So I want to go ahead, I want to bring up a mini map and just kind of explain what's happening here. So when the map gets started, one team spawns over here on the left-hand side in kind of this cave area. Another team spawns over here on this right-hand side by P3. So you can see the picture, the number 1 right in the middle. That's where the first hardpoint is. And as is the case with basically every map, that first hardpoint is really just a wash, right? Sure, you want to try to get in and get as many points as you can. Now, I will say, since we're going to 4v4, it's going to be less of a wash as it was such as in maps like Hackney Yard, right? If you could get 15 points on P1 in Hackney Yard, you were doing really well. But now that we're dealing with 4v4, it's going to be far more strategic. You have to have one person watching the flank or anchoring for P2. So I'll be excited to see what teams take advantage of having that man advantage for P1. But P1 is right in the middle of the hill. So if you're this blue team, then obviously you're just going to rush this, try to get in the hill. The key for this blue team is that once you get P1, to push up just a little bit further. Because if you can get kills on these cuts right here, then that's going to take, and it's basically going to prevent your enemies from pushing forward and countering on P1. That's a really strong point on this map, is that if you get P1 and you push out just a little bit further, that's really towards your advantage there. If you're the team that's spawning on the other side, you have a couple things to worry about. So if you're red team spawning over here, obviously you can push forward, get inside of P1 through either of these routes here. But the other thing that you have to be thinking about is that as it's rotating to P2, you don't have spawns once it gets over here to P2. And P2, it's pretty easy. I mean, P2 and P3, there are ways that it can be broken, but off the rib, it's pretty easy to defend. So if you're this squad, one thing that really works is, and you might not expect this, but if you come out here into these dunes and you take this route, so right here, you see all of these dark hills right here? Those hills are the dunes that are pretty high. They're definitely above your head. So if you come out here and you follow these dunes all the way to the back, you can actually get all the way behind P2. So what that means is, for the team that's getting that initial P2 spawn, they would have to watch. That's one of the routes that they would have to watch. And if they do that, so say you have your main anchor AR come over here to watch this route, Well, you'd have to push up here in order, you have to be in this position in order to watch this route. And if that happens, now all of a sudden you can get shot from mid-map. So that's just something to think about because it's definitely possible to flank there. The other thing that you can do, which is much more practical on this map, is just hitting this underneath route right here, getting up this hill, and then once you get here, you can wrap around either side of P2. But the thing that you can't do from here is you can't really flip spawns. Even if, like we talked about, you're this red team that flanks all the way out on this sand side of the map, even if you flank and you get behind it and you get this spawn right here, first of all, you wouldn't actually get that spawn, but if you get that location, your enemy, that initial team on the left, is still going to spawn over here in cave. So this is a really tough one. If you're the team that is trying to approach and push that spawn out, you'd have to get kills to get behind P2. You'd have to get those kills on P2, and then you'd actually have to push and get one more set of kills here as that team is coming up off a spawn. And by the time that happens, I mean, think about how much time it takes just to run all the way behind P2. That might be 30, 35 seconds to get from the right side to the left side of the map. Then you have to get a kill. Then you have to push forward, get another kill. So by the time this happens, it's almost not even beneficial to flip these spawns, just because if you do, now you've got a 20, 25, 30-second run to get back over to P3 on the other side of the hill. So that's kind of where the strategy lies for P2. When it comes to P3, it's basically the same thing. You want to be locking down one of these back spawn locations over here. You're going to get one of those spawn locations based on where the enemy is pushing. So what I mean by that is, say that team, that blue team, is getting this spawn over here. They had control of P1, and now as they try to advance to P3, they're going to take this upper top side route. If that happens, you're not going to see that red team spawn out yet, very similar to what we saw in P2, but they are going to spawn on this side of that back edge of P3. Whereas if it's just the opposite of that and that blue team pushes out mid or pushes out this bottom side of the map, they can get up to this map position, but it's still not enough to spawn the red team out. Red team will just spawn now up on the upper side of that P3 hardpoint, up on this edge of the map. So the biggest thing that I noticed about P2 and P3 is that you have to get kills to get close, right? As this blue team is pushing forward from P1, you'd have to get kills to even get up onto this side of the map. And then once you do get those kills, once you get pushed up that far, you're going to have to get another set of kills as that red team comes up off spawn on the bottom side of P3. And then finally, once that happens, they're going to be able to overtake spawns. And that's what happens when you have spawns that just make a little bit more sense, right? It's not going to push you out until you actually have somebody in that spawn location. And then when that happens, then it'll take the enemies and it'll spawn it out. But it takes a little while. Last but not least, P4 is very similar to P1 in that, say you're this team that's getting this left-hand spawn, your spawns will probably be pushed up by P2 by the time P3 ends. So this is very simple. If you get into P4, it works the same for both sides. If you can get to this power position and you can get pushed up to this power position and maybe such as one person up inside of P1, once you get the elevation advantage, as that red team comes from P3, you can get these kills right here in all of these locations. It becomes very hard once the enemy team is set up to actually get from P3 over to P4. But that also works the same way if you're going the opposite direction. It's the same thing from either side, which is why I think this map could potentially be a competitive map, because I like the way it plays. If you're this P3 squad, this red squad spawning on the right side, you push forward, you get this power position, you come over to here to P4, you get outside dunes, or you have somebody top P1. Now all of a sudden you have the elevation advantage and you're shooting down on your enemy team. So if you're thinking about P4, it can be held from either side. P1 can be held from either side. P2 is really hard to push out. P3 is really hard to push out. So because of that, I really do think that Satellite could be a competitive map. When I first played it, just like Domination, TDM, Kill Confirm that first weekend, it didn't seem to make too much sense to me. But when I actually got to play Control on it, when I actually got to play Hardpoint on it, it made quite a bit of sense. And I think you could have some really exciting games just because the spawns are so sticky based on which side you spawn on. So down in the comments below, what do you guys think? Did you like this overall when you played Hardpoint on Satellite? Was this something that you would play over and over again in competitive, or would you prefer to stick to other maps like Moscow and maybe some of the other ones that come out on release day? Let me know down in the comments below. If you're new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I put out brand new videos every single day breaking down the Call of Duty League. Leave a like, it helps out the channel. We will see you guys in tomorrow's upload.